Government spending is taxation. More spending on the military, more spending welfare, huge increases in government spending. Those are tax hikes. Now, they cut income taxes, but the income tax is just one way the government pays for spending, because all government spending has to be paid for by the public, one way or another. We don't get any government for free. Everything the government does costs us money. So every dime they spend represents taxation in some form. And what they've been doing is they've been printing money, right? The Federal Reserve prints money. And in fact, right now, the Federal Reserve is printing about 55 cents out of every federal dollar that's spent. So more money is being printed and spent than collected in taxation. But all that printing, all that spending that is being paid for by a printing press, we don't get that for free. There is a cost. See, when the government takes our money through an income tax, they take my money that I earned and they give it to somebody else who didn't earn it. And now that person spends the money. But because I don't have it, I can't spend it, I can't invest it or save it. I don't have it anymore. The government took it from me in taxes. But if the government doesn't take it from me, they just print money and they hand it to somebody else who didn't earn it and didn't do any work, didn't produce any goods or provide any services. They just, got money from the government. That still costs me, because what happens is when that money is spent in a circulation, it bids up prices. And so prices are now higher than they would have been had that new money not been printed. And so now everything that I want to buy costs more than it otherwise would have cost. Either the prices went up or it prevented prices from going down. And so now my purchasing power has been diminished. And so either the government takes your money through an income tax or a sales tax or something, or they take your purchasing power through an inflation tax. And so that's what they decided to do, to pay for government through inflation rather than taxation. But what we know from history is that is the most expensive way to pay for government. And in fact, it hits hardest the middle class and the poor, right? Because the rich have a lot of assets, they have a lot of debt, not consumer debt like on a credit card, but where they borrow money to accumulate income-producing property, to buy companies, stocks, things like that. And so inflation helps those people, right? If you have debt to buy assets, inflation wipes out your debt. But if you're just saving money and working for a living and getting a paycheck, the inflation tax is very heavy on you. And that inflation tax is going to get much, much higher. I mean, the debt's never going to go down. The debt's going to keep on rising and rising and rising until the dollar implodes. See, that is the real crisis that we're headed for. It's going to be a collapse in the value of the dollar, because right now we're printing money, right? And the government is sending it out, and people are able to buy stuff with it, right? But that's going to come to an end, because the world is no longer going to accept U.S. dollars as the reserve currency. See, that's the unique privilege that we've enjoyed for several generations now, and that we've abused to the point where we're going to lose it. See, right now, we're able to print money, and we use that money we print to buy all sorts of stuff that the rest of the world produces, that we didn't have to produce ourselves. But producing goods requires capital, it requires labor, it requires land, it requires real resources. But we get all the stuff for free. We just create money, and here you go, and they send us stuff. And then, to make it even better for us, they take the money that we send them, the paper, and they loan it right back to us at very low rates of interest. They buy our bonds, they buy our mortgage-backed securities. So Americans get to spend all this borrowed money that they didn't save. We get to consume all this stuff that we didn't produce. And so we have an artificially elevated standard of living. We live beyond our means. That's going to come to an end, because foreigners are going to realize that we're never going to stop printing money, that the deficits are never going to be brought under control, that we're going to have QE infinity, 0% interest rates in perpetuity, and then they're not going to want the dollar anymore. And then the dollar is going to crash, and we're not going to be able to import anything anymore. And the only things we're going to be able to buy is the stuff we make ourselves, except we don't make much stuff anymore. So prices are going to go through the roof. That is the real economic consequences. And so it's not going to matter that the government sends you a stimulus check if you can't buy anything with it, because the government can't create purchasing power. They can print all the money they want, but none of that printed money adds any purchasing power. They don't grow any food. They don't produce any products, nothing. They just print money. See, you can't keep printing trillions and trillions of dollars and expect the dollars not to lose purchasing power, right? Because paper money, all that does is that allows us to divvy up what we produce. Government spending is a drain on the private sector. It's a drag on the economy. It's the government taking resources away from the private sector where they would be used efficiently and squander them in the public sector. Most of the government money is transfer payments, where the government takes money from one person and gives it to somebody else. I mean, the government shouldn't be doing that. That's not why we have a government in America. We have to start spending less. We have to save more. And that means we can't go out as often. We need to build up our savings again because we've depleted it. So there's going to be less demand for restaurants. There's going to be less demand for a lot of things. We have to let these companies downsize. Look, this is not productive. This is making the problem worse. We're a shadow of a former self. We don't have the industrial might. We don't have the savings. So we don't have the tax base for the government to tap into. We just have a printing press. And we can only use that because foreigners are dumb enough to accept our money. And, they're not going to be accepting it much longer.